Polonius is one of Shakespeare's great comic characters. This is a tragedy, but who says we can't be funny? As I've said before, there is comedy larded throughout this tragedy, and Polonius is pretty amusing. He is funniest when he attempts to be serious and intellectual. Polonius is a highly educated, goofy, long-winded man. He's my brother. I feel him. But he is absurd. He also is extremely quotable. You've all heard Shakespeare quoted as saying, brevity is the soul of wit. That's a nice little precise epigram. Brevity is the soul of wit. Short, sweet, about shortness and sweetness. It's a moment where form and function go together. You're going to have a piece of advice that's about being short, and you make it short too. That's great. But that's not the whole sentence. As so often happens with famous Shakespeare quotations, once we put them back into context in the character's mouth, they seem very different. So here is my man Polonius speaking to the queen. My liege and madam, to expostulate what majesty should be, what duty is, why day is day, night, night, and time is time, were nothing but to waste night, day, and time. Therefore, since brevity is the soul of wit, and tediousness the limbs or outward flourishes, I will be brief. It's a little late for that, my man. Sorry, P. You are done being brief. I will be brief. Your noble son is mad. Mad call it, for to define true madness. What is it but to be nothing else but mad? Let that go. Okay, what's going on here? What makes Polonius so funny is that he's doing something that should be the right thing and missing. That he is a perverse or parodic version of a genuine kind of excessive. This is a way, he has a particular style that's about how certain kind of learned Elizabethan spoke. This is how you showed off. You showed off your rhetorical skill, that carefully structured counterbalancing, the parallelism of the sentence structure, and the fact that you could come up with like 6 of these off the top of your head proved that you were smarter than someone who could come up with only 2 examples off the top of your head. Polonius talks too much. It is too highly structured, too obviously artificial. And part of how Hamlet works, and I mean Hamlet the play, part of how this play works is by showing through excess what the right way to speak is. Hamlet sounds better than Polonius, not because Hamlet doesn't sometimes speak in structured artificial ways, but because he's not as ridiculously excessively structured as Polonius is. The comic style, the ridiculous style of someone trying to sound smart and blowing it by going over the top, is there to help construct the sense of what a more moderate and appropriate and cooler style would be. He looks silly. Polonius looks silly so that Hamlet sounds smarter. The actor playing Polonius also has to be, through the long stretch of Act 2, Scene 2, has to be Hamlet's straight man. He has to be a comic talent who can both bring the funny and deliver the punchlines on his own, as in the I will be brief. Yeah, brevity is the soul. The very long-winded brevity is the soul of wit speech, or the ridiculously long-winded advice to his children, and be the setup to just feed Hamlet the punchlines in that long exchange, and then get killed. Here, in Act 1, Scene 3, from about line 53, 54, here is Polonius giving his famous advice. Yet here it is, abort, for shame, the wind sits in the shoulder of your sail, and you are stayed for. There, my blessing with thee. And these few precepts in thy memory look thou character. Give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought his act. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar. Those friends thou hast and their adoption tried, grapple them unto thy soul with hoops of steel, but do not dull thy palm with entertainment of each new-hatched, unfledged courage. Beware of entrance to a quarrel, but being in, bear that the opposed may beware of thee. Give every man thy ear, but few thy voice. Take each man's censure, but reserve thy judgment. Costly thy habit as thy purse can buy, but not expressed in fancy. Rich, not gaudy. For the apparel oft proclaims the man, and they in France of the best rank and station are of a most select and generous chief in that neither a borrower nor a lender be, for loan oft loses both itself and friend, and borrowing dulleth the edge of husbandry. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. Farewell, my blessing season this indeed. I love that begins with, hey, what are you still doing here? Your boat is leaving. Go, 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 but first just for a minute. Just for a minute. Just stay for a minute. And then there's a 42-line pile of advice. You've heard some of that advice before. Some of those have been clipped out as familiar quotations. First, you see again the problem of quoting Shakespeare out of context, like neither a borrower nor a lender be, doesn't seem like good advice when it comes out of the mouth of a known buffoon. To thine own self be true is good advice, but this ridiculous person gives it. Let me say a few things about that. One is Shakespeare gives his fools and villains their own point of view. It does not write star vehicles with one star actor, Hamlet, and then a bunch of flunkies who are just there to serve Hamlet's story. He writes for a repertory company. He acted with the same group of men and boys 6 days a week. This acting team worked together and they did a different play all 6 days a week. They did 6 different plays a week. It was crazy. You need to give interesting parts to all of your fellow actors, and Shakespeare really does. Smaller parts are pretty juicy in Shakespeare a lot of the time. More importantly, this leads Shakespeare to give villains and fools their own point of view. The king is a liar, a brother murderer, an incestuous dog, and he's someone who's planning to murder a bunch of other people. He's a bad guy. His advice isn't always bad. The advice he gives to Hamlet in Act 1, Scene 2, the king's advice, is not bad or stupid. It's just coming from a bad person. He's not a cartoon meanie who's just being evil for no reason. He's got a genuine point of view. He's a bad person, but he's a bad person, an actual bad human being who's fully fleshed out. In the same way, Polonius gives ridiculous advice, but he's allowed to not be a complete cartoon. Some of this advice is good. And here's the thing. Some of this advice is good in or out of context, and there's a huge debate over how we read to thine own self be true. Is that idealistic? Is that, because Polonius doesn't seem like the biggest idealist. Is that cynical? Because Polonius is this guy who's latched on to an evil, powerful man. It's ambiguous. That's how this play works. It is, and it managed, therefore, to be both of those things. And maybe something else when you're looking at it close enough. Maybe it's 2 things, maybe it's 3, maybe it's 5 things. The closer you look at this play, the more meaning you can find in it. This is why it stays on our greatest hits list. The other reason this advice is good is because all of these beats of advice are good. The way Polonius is speaking here, he's got a bunch of bromides, of proverbs that are generally not controversial. They're not bad advice. They're not exciting or interesting. But instead of saying, I've got some proverbial advice that will make me sound smart. Here, son, let me tell you a couple proverbial things. If he left it at 1 or even 3, he'd be okay. But it's an explosion because Polonius works in the system that the more you talk, the smarter you are. So instead of giving 1 piece of proverbial advice, he gives 32 lines of proverbs. It's like the man is just talking in iambic pentameter bumper stickers for 5 minutes. Or a minute and a half, really. It's bananas. It's works so well. It's so funny because it's so close to a real thing people do. Polonius is an exaggeration, but not by much. Some sometimes I've seen people do a Polonius in actual Cleveland State faculty meetings. Sometimes the person doing that ridiculous Polonius thing in a Cleveland State faculty meeting is me. He's a great comic character because he's a slight exaggeration of a habit you see in the world that Shakespeare sees around him and that people do actually do. We are making fun of a form of human folly, but especially we're making fun of a particular kind of verbal style. These plays are about language. How you speak is who you are. That is basically how Shakespeare operates. How you talk is who you are. Hamlet, complicated, intelligent language, complicated, intelligent character. Laertes, somewhat simpler language. Laertes is somewhat simpler. Polonius, close but no cigar, or a little too far, excessive and hence ridiculous, makes him excessive and yet ridiculous. How you talk is who you are. Sorry, Polonius, but at least you're famous.